that I will get.
Lab. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nuziha. I'm going to be your host for the day. I'm a PhD second year in the Health Science Department. I'm also on the HRI seminar leadership committee and also on the Health Research Institute's leadership council. This is going to be the last of our HRI seminar, and I'm so delighted that we have our 3 honors students present today. Moving on, we'd like to acknowledge the land of Tene, where we live, study, gather, and work. This is just the members of our HRI seminar series planning committee. We have Leanna, and we have Dr. Rihanna Robinson, Kendra Ferber, Bree, and myself. These are our financial contributors. And then I would like to just let you guys know that we have a membership portal for our HRI. So you guys can scan and just be a member in there. You'll get to know everything that HRI is doing at UNBC and also get to know the updates on HRI and the events that we're being. And this is another thing that UNBC being doing. I'm also the project coordinator at the Research Commons that we are planning to build in UNBC. So Research Commons is a collaborative space which we are looking forward for graduate students to come and collaborate and do interdisciplinary research. So this is something that we are planning to do in the future, and we want to hear your voice, and we want to know what you would like to have it tailored towards UNBC. So we are having a Zoom session at April 7th, on April 7th at 12 to 1 p.m. So if you guys could just hop in and just throw in your recommendations in there, that would be really helpful. We also have our HRI annual meeting on the April 24th at 11 a.m. to 1:30. So you guys can join, we have lunch, and that'd be nice. We also have a research and quality conference that's being done in collaboration with the Northern Health. So again, the QR code is here. So if you guys want to know more about it, just please scan in. So today's big day for our 4th year honors students. We have 3 honors students presenting today, and I would like to invite the first one, which is Jenna Ria. Her supervisor is Dr. Jacqueline Pedersen. She's in the psychology department, and her research is on vitamin D and cognition in young adult university students. Just welcome, Ria. Okay, do you want to move around? But I'll just.
Thank you for the introduction. So like she said, my name is Jenna Ray, and today I'll be talking about my undergraduate honors thesis project, which looked at vitamin D and cognition in young adult university students. I'd like to say a special thanks to my co-supervisors, Dr. Pedersen and Dr. Klassen-Ross. Your continued guidance and support was very helpful, and the project would not have been possible without that, so thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Catherine Bailey, who's a 4th year medical student, who helped me with the data collection during her flex block. So thank you, Catherine. I just want to respectfully acknowledge that the UNBC Prince George campus is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lheidli T'enneh, on whose land we live, work, and play. Let's go through a quick outline of what I'll be talking about today. So I'll go through a background of the relationship between vitamin D and cognition and kind of why we decided to do the project. I'll go through our objectives and hypotheses, talk about the materials and methods, discuss the results, and then finally end with the discussion and conclusion. So what is vitamin D and why is it important? Vitamin D is a prohormone and essential nutrient that is present in 2 primary forms, vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol and vitamin D2 or ergocalciferol. The key source of vitamin D is skin exposure to the sun. It is also obtained through the diet, although to a much lesser extent. And it's really important for one's overall health because research suggests that inadequate vitamin D is associated with an increased risk of neurological disorders, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, metabolic disorders, and death. Vitamin D is also a neurosteroid that plays an important role in brain function in several ways, such as neuroprotection and neuroplasticity. Furthermore, the vitamin D receptor is found in multiple areas of the brain that are important for cognition, such as the frontal cortex and the hippocampus. It is well established that vitamin D plays an important role in the cognitive functioning of older adults and young adolescents. However, this role remains relatively unexplored in young adults. Consequently, there is currently a gap in the literature examining the link between vitamin D and cognition in this particular population, which led us to conduct this project. So the first objective of our project was to determine the prevalence of vitamin D insufficiency among young adult university students residing in northern British Columbia, Canada. Vitamin D insufficiency is commonly defined as having levels of less than 75 nanomoles per liter. And our second objective was to determine whether vitamin D levels and sufficiency status are linked with cognitive functioning in young adults. So based on the available evidence, we first predicted that vitamin D insufficiency will be common among this population sample, and secondly, that vitamin D levels and sufficiency status will be associated with cognition, particularly with executive functioning and visual memory, as shown in past research. So our participants consisted of UMBC students between the ages of 18 and 35. The research design was of a cross-sectional and prospective nature, and in-person interviews that took about 1 hour were conducted, in which participants were asked about demographic and health-related factors, including body mass index and mood, which was measured by the Beck Depression Inventory 2. The following battery of cognitive tests were then administered. So first, we administered the Ray Osterreich Complex Figure Test, which measures visual memory, then the Ray Auditory Verbal Learning Task, which measures verbal learning and memory, the digit span forward and backward, which measures attention, and finally the verbal fluency task, which measures executive functioning. Mail-in blood spot test kits were then used to measure participants' vitamin D levels, and data collection occurred between November and January when the cutaneous synthesis of vitamin D is extremely low or non-existent. I'll go through some of the participant characteristics that we found. So a total of 62 participants completed cognitive testing and the blood spot testing, and thus their data was included in the final analysis. The mean age of the participants was 22 years old. The most participants were assigned female at birth, right-handed, and Caucasian/European. Most participants were also undergraduate students in their first year of studies, with the sciences being the most common program of study. Regarding medical diagnoses, depression was the most common, followed by migraines and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Other learning disabilities, cancer, kidney problems, and developmental delays were present in our sample, although much less common, as you can see in the table. The body mass index of the participants ranged from 16.5 to 42.6, with a mean of 24.5, which falls in the normal range. And the score on the Beck Depression Inventory 2 ranged from 0 to 45, with a mean of 15.9, which indicates mild depression. For the vitamin D levels and status of the participants, the total vitamin D levels of the participants range from 29.9 nanomoles per liter to 161.85 nanomoles per liter, with a mean of 82.2 nanomoles per liter. 17 participants were taking vitamin D supplements, with dosages ranging from 2,000 international units per month to 2,000 international units per day. So as you can see on the table, 12.9% of our participants had deficient levels of vitamin D, so less than 50 nanomoles per liter, which would be the first two rows combined. And then 43.5% had insufficient levels, which is again less than 75 nanomoles per liter, which would be the first three rows combined. We also looked at the association between vitamin D levels and the cognitive test, and Pearson or Spearman's rank correlations were used as appropriate. So we found a significant moderate positive correlation between total vitamin D levels and the immediate word span measure of the Ray Auditory Verbal Learning Task. There was also a significant moderate positive correlation between total vitamin D levels and scores on the digit span forward. There was a small positive correlation between vitamin D levels and total word learning of the Ray Auditory Verbal Learning Task. However, it barely met significance with a p-value of 0.05. And finally, there was a trend toward a significant positive correlation between total vitamin D levels and average scores on the verbal fluency task, but this did not meet significance. We also looked at how performance on the cognitive test varied according to participants' vitamin D status. So participants were divided into two groups based on their vitamin D levels. Those with levels of less than 75 nanomoles per liter were designated to be insufficient, and this group comprised of 27 participants and is represented by the white bar here on both of the graphs. And then participants with levels of greater than or equal to 75 nanomoles per liter were deemed to be sufficient, which comprised of 35 participants and is represented by the black bars here on both of the graphs. Participants with sufficient vitamin D levels recalled significantly more words on the immediate word span measure on the Ray auditory verbal learning task compared to those with insufficient levels with a moderate effect. This can be seen on the graph on the left, where the y-axis is the mean number of words recalled on the Ray auditory verbal learning task immediate word span, and the x-axis is the vitamin D levels, with again the groups being the sufficient on the black bar and the white bar being the insufficient group. And then as you can see from the graph on the right, where the y-axis is the mean digit span forward scores, participants with sufficient vitamin D levels had significantly higher scores than those with insufficient levels. And again, this had a moderate effect. And no other cognitive test differed significantly between participants with sufficient and insufficient vitamin D levels. Our results showed that almost half of our sample had insufficient levels of vitamin D, which supports our first hypothesis that vitamin D insufficiency would be common among young adult university students residing in northern British Columbia, Canada. Our second hypothesis that vitamin D levels insufficiency status will be linked with cognition was also supported. And in particular, we found that vitamin D was only significantly related to verbal learning / memory and attention. And interestingly, this differs from previous studies looking at older adults and young adolescents, in which executive functioning and visual memory were the cognitive domains most associated with vitamin D. We also had a few limitations, the first being that we cannot make any causal conclusions about the relationship between vitamin D and cognition due to the cross-sectional observational nature of this research design, emphasizing the need for more randomized controlled trials with supplementation to be conducted in young adults. And secondly, our sample was comprised solely of university students who were primarily female and Caucasian / European, thus potentially lacking generalizability to the overall population of young adults. So future studies should be conducted with more diverse populations of young adults outside of just university students. So to conclude, vitamin D insufficiency was common during the winter months in this population, emphasizing the importance of educating young adults on maintaining adequate vitamin D levels through sun exposure, diet, and/or supplementation, especially during the winter months. Our study suggests that vitamin D seems to play an important role in the verbal learning / memory and attention in young adults. And to our knowledge, this study is the first linking those particular domains to vitamin D in young adults. The research contributes to the literature by being one of the few studies examining the relationship between vitamin D and cognition in young adults. And although further research is needed, vitamin D supplementation is generally safe, effective, and affordable. And it seems that having higher levels of vitamin D is beneficial to the overall health and cognition of young adults. Thank you so much.
I forgot to mention this, but our presenters are going to have like 10 minutes of talk, and then after that, like a 5 minutes of question and answer session. So if you have any questions.
You talked a little bit about the vitamin D at the beginning, but for some reason, there seems to be, I don't know if it's true or not, but that vitamin D for the sun is better for you than the supplementation. So is there really any way, like, is there any physiological explanation on how the metabolism of those differs in the body, or why would we hypothesize that there's a difference or no difference?
I don't know too much. I didn't focus too much on the physiological aspect of it, but I know that the cutaneous synthesis of vitamin D is the most effective way for it to be metabolized into the bloodstream. So I think that that's probably why people say that the sun is just a better way, because you can get a lot more from only like 20 minutes of sun compared to a supplement. So that would be my hypothesis as to why, because it is the most effective and primary source of vitamin D is through the skin. And then the supplementation probably just takes a little bit longer for it to actually be metabolized into the blood.
It would be the circulating amount that's important, not necessarily whether you get it from the sun.
Exactly, because yeah, the circulating amount is what shows up when we measure the vitamin D levels, so that would be what's actually present in blood. Yeah.
Sort of following up on the supplement, you said you asked your participants whether they were taking vitamin D supplementation. How did that segregate into the two groups that you ended up, like the greater than 75 nanomolar and less than 75?
Yeah, so we didn't focus too much on the supplement versus non-supplement, just because the supplement group was very small, so it was a little bit harder to compare just the people with supplements to the rest of the group. The raw means of their vitamin D levels, the people who were on supplementation had a lot higher vitamin D levels. So it was making a difference for them, but as far as the cognitive test, it actually didn't make much of a difference. The groups of insufficient and sufficient were pretty spread out no matter what whether they were taking supplementation. Some of the people were only taking supplementation for a few weeks or a couple months, and it takes about 3 months for it to actually make a difference in your blood level. So that could be a reason why there were still some people in the insufficient group who were on supplementation.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay. We are actually, so yeah, the consent form gave the participants an option to get their vitamin D levels individually and the overall results of the study. So I think almost everyone except one person wanted their vitamin D level. So we are going to send everyone a PDF copy with their vitamin D level, and it indicates whether they're in the sufficient or insufficient range. So we're going to do that once the whole thesis is done so that we can send people the overall results of the study as well. But yeah, I think that was a good selling point for the study because to get your own vitamin D level, you actually have to privately pay for it. So this was a way for students to get it and not have to go out of their way to pay for it.
Thank you, Jenna. Next up, we have Rupali Cheema. Her supervisor is Dr. Tharu Manyanga. Sorry if I'm like pronouncing it wrong. So her research is on short community-based sports programs and mental health in immigrant children and youth. So let's all welcome Rupali.
Hi everyone, my name is Rupali and I completed my thesis under the supervision of Dr. Truman Yanga. And I had the privilege of working on his larger project, the sports participation for physical literacy, mental health, and sense of belonging among equity-seeking and newcomer children and youth in Northern BC, which is still an ongoing study. And I did my thesis on short community-based sports programs and mental health in immigrant children and youth. Just like to acknowledge Taru's help over the last 8 months with the thesis and the whole research team that also helped collect data. Just a quick overview of what I'm be going over today. So just a quick background of my presentation. So just going through the objectives, methods, and then focus on the results, discussion, and the future direction that this research could take. Participation in organized sports can lead to positive physical and mental health changes as participating in sports is widely recognized as an essential component of children's healthy development, providing physical and social. Participating in sports can thus give immigrant children a sense of belonging, opportunities for social contact, and a platform to develop deserving children due to several reasons. As many recent immigrants, their main priority is usually establishing economic stability, and thus their number one priority isn't always putting their kids into sports. Thus, a sports-based sport programming can offer children with socioeconomic and other disadvantages and an opportunity to participate. Associations between sport participation, mental health, and fundamental movement skills among immigrant children are important areas of research, particularly in today's Canadian society where immigration rates are continuing to increase. And just going to the literature review, there are a lot of gaps in research, in particular in this area. Just before we get into the whole gist of the presentation, I'd quickly like to define physical literacy and fundamental movement skills, as that is a key component of my research. Physical literacy is just the foundation of physical activity participation, and is defined as the motivation, confidence, physical competence, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engaging in physical activities. Fundamental movement skills is a key component of physical literacy and can lead to specialized movement skills. Proficiency in these skills is required for children to participate confidently in physical activities, which improves their physical literacy and long-term health. With a connection to mental health as well, mental health conditions affect over 1 million children in Canada, and this rate is also continuing to increase with more children facing anxiety and depression. Canadian youth who experience mental health problems will often have difficulties adjusting at home, struggle academically, and experience social difficulties at school. Other studies have also found that physical activity is a potential determinant of mental health and is determined more frequent physical activity and participation in sports were independently associated with greater well-being and lower levels of anxiety in. Thus, we got two objectives that we looked at during my thesis. The first, we wanted to explore if participation in short community-based programs could improve immigrant and equity deserving children's fundamental skills, and examine if the program could improve their self or proxy reported mental health. Just going through the methods, our study followed a pre-post study design and in collaboration with Engage Sport North. Engage Sport North runs community-based programs for children between the ages of 6 and 12, and these programs are targeted to increase children's physical literacy. Engage Sport North designed a similar program and ran it as an after-school program at 3 elementary schools in Prince George. The 3 elementary schools were Peden Hill, Hart Highlands, and Foothills. And each program was 8 weeks long, occurring once a week for 1 hour. And we did during 2 sessions. There was a fall session from October till November of 2024, and then January to February of 2025. Our participants were from equity deserving groups who were enrolled in the after-school program, and they had the opportunity to volunteer for the present study. The participants, again, they range between the age of 6 and 12 years old and varied in gender. Recruitment of participants occurred via Engage Sport North and their home school. An incentive was provided to participants at initial sign-up, or if the participant wanted to participate in the study, the registration fees for the after-school program was paid for. We measured 3 things for the participants. We measured their fundamental movement skills, mental health, and collected socio-demographic data. For socioeconomic demographic data, we included their gender, age, and residency status. which was collected via a questionnaire that the parent or guardian filled out alongside the child. For fundamental movement skills, we measured those via the Play Basic tool, and we measured 5 skills, which are running, hopping, overhand, throw, kicking, and balance. They balance walk backwards. And the mental health of the participants was measured before and after the program via pre and post intervention questionnaire. So participants completed the Play Basic assessment twice. First, they completed it on the first day of the session before they took part in the program, and we established their baseline via that assessment. As well, they completed a pre-intervention questionnaire, just answering questions about their mental health and providing their socio-demographic data. Then after the 8 weeks, we went on the final session of the program, and we did the same assessments again with the Play Basic assessment. So we measured their fundamental movement skills again, and they completed a questionnaire assessing their mental health again. We had a total of 36 participants taking part in the study. However, 14 were excluded from the full analysis due to incomplete data. Sometimes on the last day of the session, the child wasn't present, or there was incomplete consent given from the first session. Therefore, they were left out. Table 1 presents data from 30 participants with all relevant data at the baseline. So these were participants that were present for the first session. They gave full consent, but they just weren't present for the last day. There were 15 participants who identified as girls and 15 boys, and the mean age of the sample was 7.83 years old. So table 2 just looks at the baseline data separated by gender. So at baseline, there was no statistically significant gender differences in age or mental health or the 5 fundamental movement skills that we measured. And this is table 3, which shows the full analysis of the 22 participants that had the full data available. There are statistically significant changes in each fundamental movement skill, as there was a mean change of 4.4 across all the skills, and a positive change in mental health, which is indicated by the p-values, which shows that there was a significant change. What did we find? Well, after the 8-week sports programs, participants showed improvement across all 5 fundamental movement skills with an average positive change of 4.4 across their Play Basic scores. Despite the statistically significant increase in the mean scores across all 5 fundamental movement skills and the total scores, participants remained within the emerging category still on the Play Basic assessment. So Play Basic assessment is separated into 4 categories. There's a 0 to 25, which is a beginning, and then 25 to 50, which is emerging, and so on. So participants still stayed within that 25 to 50 point range. Potential limitations for this was inconsistencies in scoring, because we were not able to control which research assistant assessed the same child before and after, and some were grading the kids more stricter than others. For mental health, we found that prior to participating in the 8-week sports program, our baseline data revealed that almost 80% of the participants reported normal mental health. However, baseline data also showed that 22.7% of the participants experienced mild or moderate mental health challenges, such as anxiety or depression. After the 8 weeks, though, the post-intervention data demonstrated significant improvement with only 9% of participants reporting mental health issues. Potential limitations for this was we had a very small sample size, so it's hard to just generalize the data across the whole data set. and no similar research has specifically examined the effects of physical activity interventions on the mental health of immigrant children. Although we found with the questionnaires, a lot of parents found it difficult to explain to a lot of the younger age range kids, like the 6 and 7-year-old children, how to like answer the questions for mental health, which could also be a reason why we saw the results that we saw. The future direction. As sports participation offers invaluable physical, psychological, and social benefits, significant barriers such as economic challenges, cultural differences, and language barriers hinder access for many immigrant children to access these programs. Further research has the potential to inform policies and programs that promote inclusive, accessible opportunities for immigrant youths to thrive. Additionally, additional future research could investigate the impacts of sports-based community programs over a longer duration than 8 weeks, as well as have a larger sample size that could help see greater effects. Thank you.
You have like 5 minutes for asking questions.
Yes.
So in your presentation, you mentioned that some of the kids that you signed up were already signed up in that engaged sport activity. Was that? And then if they signed up, then you would pay for the subscription.
Yeah, so for the first session from October to November, that's how we did it, was they would sign up before, and then if they checked off that they wanted to participate in the study, then it was paid for. But that was also a reason why we saw less participants, because we weren't actively recruiting people for the study. So our first session, we only actually had, I believe it was 9 or 10 children participate. But then in the winter session, we were actively recruiting. So when participants were coming to the first session, we would approach them, and that's why we saw a greater number of participants in that session.
Yeah, because one of the things I would have think about is, if you advertise it at the school that if you participate, then
Yeah.
You mentioned one of your potential about the bias, and I think you also mentioned something about the child's parents being there to explain how to answer, or not how to answer the question, but how to answer the question. Do you think that had a significant like skew of your results? Having a parental figure there might the child might feel influenced to answer in a way that would make the parent feel like they're doing a better job, or
definitely, because a lot of parents with their feedback after too was either some kids would just check off they feel fine because they don't really understand, because the younger age group, they might not always understand what it means to you're feeling anxious or you're feeling worried, you're regularly feeling worrying. So that was definitely one of the bias that we considered.
Do you think if you were to do this study again, I understand that there's having a guardian there, you might be required to have that, but do you think having an unbiased or a third party to do those questions might help get a more?
Yeah, it might help. Especially with the older age group, that could definitely be something, but also for the younger kids, they might be more comfortable answering those type of questions with their parents, because parents would be better able to provide examples of those questions to them. But that would definitely be a possibility.
Can you provide some examples of the questions that were asked in the questionnaire about mental health?
Yeah, one question was how many I think it was how many times a week do you usually feel anxious? Or how often do you feel worrying and stuff like that? But they were very broad, open-ended questions, which is when the parents would provide examples if they needed to, then they would cater those specific to their child.
This is also about the survey given to the children. Do you is there a tool that you're aware of where it's a survey that is maybe more appropriate for the child to understand? because like if I'm talking to my 6-year-old niece, ask her to evaluate something over a period of time, like a week, like she's really going to struggle with reflecting on that much time in order to like pick out like incidents in which she could identify her emotions, be able to like be a better match to the cognitive abilities of a child that age that you could have used?
I didn't look into like that specifically, but I know with the research team when we were after data collection, that was one thing that for the future of the study was one thing to consider how to make it more simple for kids to answer. I think there's like a pain scale that I think Tammy usually uses for her kids. Like it's like 1 to 10, but there's like based on faces, like there's little emotions. Something like that could be beneficial in this too, where kids are more easily able to distinguish based on visuals versus a question.
How can you think of a way, or how much do you think their contribution is to the change in mental health from the physical activity versus from the social aspect of doing a group activity? So, like if you had done instead of a sport event, like maybe a board game event, is there any way to untangle those two
So
aspects?
there has been a study that I looked at one while I was working on my thesis where they did compare just like low effort games such as like crafting and stuff with kids compared to doing a physical activity. There are similar changes with that as well, because again it's that sense of belonging that a child obtains and that social aspect with like creating friends, which also I think it's more from that aspect of things too, because a lot of the kids after like they on based on the first session and last session you can see that they've made new friends and they want to come there, they're excited to come, so that would definitely be a bigger aspect of it.
This is more like sort of like it's not a question, but a comment to sort of add to. This is sort of like in a bigger study. A lot of the questions you're asking are sort of beyond what she's doing. The questionnaire itself is supplemented by, we have questions on sense of belonging, we have questions on mental health, but we're actually very keen on trying to tease out, can we use this questionnaire actually appropriately for this age group? So there is a bit of validity in the whole study. There's a bit of reliability in this study. But unfortunately for Rupali, she's just doing this small section of the study. But all of the questions you are asking are very valid and questions that we've grappled with. And part of what we're doing is actually to challenge this questionnaire because it's used a lot and we think it's probably not as great in the younger age groups.
Like, that's one thing that could look at, like, in future studies as well, because for this, we weren't able to control or observe the child when they were taking part in the sport that they were playing, like during the program, because we were outside. We were just there for the first and last session. So we were able to observe that. And since the Engaged Sport North was controlling the program, they had their coaches. So we weren't able to observe that. But in future studies, it definitely be a more controlled environment where you would be able to see, like, if we, the assessors, were like ourselves running the program, we could see that. We would be able to observe when the child is feeling, like during one sport, you could observe if a kid is feeling better if they like that sport, if they don't. But that was definitely one limitation of the study right now, was we weren't able to observe that, so we weren't able to tell that. I don't know if that answers your question. Regarding the mental health aspect, no, there wasn't that much in the literature. A lot of studies mainly focus on the fundamental movement skill side of things.
I can add one thing before I run. I have a meeting. So as you see, she's just presenting sort of descriptive data because we're a very small sample. The idea is when the whole studies end, we can do more robust analysis to control for certain things. There is a qualitative component to this study where we ask parents questions like that. What do you think about whether or not this child is actually feeling like loneliness, or is it because they're excited? But this is one of the reasons we're doing this, is to challenge the instruments that are there to show that they lack something, but we can't do it without the data that shows that this is actually not as robust as it should be. Your questions are valid in that at that age is really difficult to understand the child, but there is an added layer in this case where kids are often that are immigrant, or their parents are immigrant. There is a layer of maybe culture, there's a layer of language. So there are many layers, I think, that are interesting for us to tease out. For Rupali, it is well beyond the scope of what she could do, because we only have 22 participants, and this is ongoing. So we can't really run any analysis to see if we control for mental health, as in this question, what happens with this outcome. We can't do that because we have a very small sample. Yeah, I'll answer and then I'll run. Physiologically, you can do it. You can measure certain outcomes in a child when they are being active, after being active, but also just socialization. There are many studies that will tell you just being in a group of kids with other kids can help you with outcomes XYZ. This is not the focus of this study. The focus was really like pilot, trying to get, if we took kids, put them in a group with others, can we see any changes? The first part of your question is valid in that, is this the right instrument? That question is, I think the hypothesis is that it is not, but we can't say it without testing the equipment, the instrument. The other second part of your question, which is about physiological changes that happen versus participating, post-participation, is beyond the scope of this particular study, but it is relevant. It's just that we were not focusing on that.
Thank you, Rupali. If you have more questions, you're welcome to stay back and ask questions, but we have to move on now. Our last presenter is Naomi Cole, and her supervisor is Dr. Luke Harris. She's in the biomedical department, and her research is titled Respiratory Muscle Training, Feeling Completely Underwater. That's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Naomi Cole, and over the past year, I've had the privilege of working on piloting a respiratory muscle training program that utilizes near-infrared spectroscopy with Dr. Luke Harris. I'd like to preface that for the remainder of this study, I will be referring to respiratory muscle training as RMT. The idea of this study came after UNBC's underwater hockey team, the Timber Whales, were reinstated after a decades-long hiatus. While there are studies with RMT that examine its effectiveness on other sports, underwater hockey is not included. This led Dr. Harris and I to pilot a progressive Spire Tiger training protocol with increasing intensity in order to measure the improvements in strength and endurance on the sternocleidomastoid muscle, or SEM. The SEM was chosen for this study as it is an inspiratory accessory muscle that is superficially palpable in the neck. Historically, RMT studies utilize a chest strap to continuously monitor heart rate. However, Kim et al. Identified that the Apple Watch Series 7 demonstrated high reliability with a mean average percentage error of less than 2%, an intra-correlation coefficient of 0.9 in all circumstances. This indicated a strong correlation with the gold standard 12-lead electrocardiogram. While the study did include 2 other wearable devices, we chose to use the Apple Watch Series 7 when considering convenience, comfort, and ease of ethical approval. Unfortunately, today, I do not have any results to share due to unforeseen circumstances that caused time restraints in our study. However, after talking about 2 of these circumstances, I'm going to demonstrate exactly how we are collecting the data for the study. The first is with the nature of the NIRS devices. They work by emitting infrared light that penetrates the skin and underlying tissue to reach blood vessels and hemoglobin. The detector measures the energy of the light that is reflected back, allowing it to do real-time calculations of the oxygenated, deoxygenated, and total hemoglobin. Inside of each device, there's a lithium-ion battery. However, in these devices, the ion batteries have since expired. And unfortunately, the company that produced the Oxytor devices has since disbanded. This caused Dr. Harris and I to source and purchase new ion batteries for the devices. As you can see in the photos, I removed the wires that the new batteries came with because the plugs for them were too small for the sockets in the circuit board. I then soldered on new wires with plugs of the correct size. The second circumstance came during one of the training sessions. To determine the correct bag volume size, we looked at pre-existing, determined or suggested the appropriate volume size to be 55% of a participant's forced expiratory volume in 6 seconds, or FEV6. However, during one of the sessions, we mistakenly used a bag volume size from one of the previous sessions, which for that particular session was too large. This paired with the on period of 90 seconds and break period of 90 seconds resulted in a few seconds of unconsciousness as, as I was not getting the appropriate amount of oxygen or appropriate amount of oxygen. While this experience did highlight the importance of not assuming the volume size as sessions progressed, it also provided interesting data into the SEM muscle, the oxygenation of the SEM muscle during the stint, and allowed myself, Dr. Luke, and the research assistants to be able to quickly identify like if a participant may be on the verge of going into. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to use the respiratory muscle trainer, and then I will ask a participant to come up and try it for themselves. So Dr. Luke is going to help me put on the NIRS device. And while I'm using the Respiratiger, or the Respiratiger, he's going to explain to you what you're seeing on our software.
As you'll see, she can't really explain it to you while she's doing it.
So normally we would also put, while we wipe down the device with an alcohol swab and the participant's neck, we also put on waterproof eyelash glue to keep it held in place, because the training periods we're doing are over 20 minutes. And so over time, you'll see it's pretty rapid movements, and it just helps the device stay in place.
This is one of the benefits of having a variety of people work in the lab, because I never would have thought of lash glue in a million years. And this is a problem that we've had trying to do work like this in the past, where the light leakage between the skin and the device means that we don't get data that we can use afterward, and we actually had to throw out an entire study's worth of data. So I was explaining this problem to Naomi and one of the volunteer research assistants in the lab, and they're like, lash glue. So we've been working with that, and it looks like it's probably going to give us exactly what we need in the longer term.
So there are different methods of using the Respiratiger, and I looked at a multitude of different videos, and the one that we chose is from one called MVM Italia. And you can do it on a yoga ball, you can do it in a chair, you can do it standing up. When I did faint, I was standing up. So after that, we decided it was best for the participants to be sitting in a chair. And normally it would be without arms, so we can catch them. However, since that happened, we had never had a problem. So hopefully we'll never have to catch anyone. So if you'd like, you can stand up and see what I'm doing, but get started.
Before you start, why don't you just do a couple of normal breaths.
Okay.
So what you're seeing right now, the red trace is the oxygenated hemoglobin, the blue trace is the deoxygenated hemoglobin, and the green trace is total. I'm actually going to get rid of one of these plots or minimize it. So one of the things that you see as Naomi does the training is that you get these huge swings in your hemoglobin levels. The green one in particular is telling us what the local blood volume is in the capillary beds in the muscle that we're monitoring. And that's kind of important because it tells us that the muscles are actually doing their job. The other thing I'll just mention while Naomi's doing this is that you can hear a valve clicking in here, and that valve is determining how much of what she is inspiring is coming from the bag versus the atmosphere.
Awesome.
And I won't lie, after that day that Naomi passed out in the lab, every time she does this,
Okay, would anybody else like to try?
We won't put the nears on you because that takes a little bit too long and
Okay.
the tape hurts a little bit.
Laura? Okay, awesome.
Naomi, I forgot I was supposed to do this.
Oh, that's okay. Do you have any other questions? Okay. You're gonna see, it's gonna tell you to breathe up. There's gonna be an arrow going up, and then when it goes down, you breathe down. Okay.
Here's that little magnetic valve that you hear clicking during the breathing. This is critical because I don't know if Naomi actually remembers or if she put this in the presentation or not, but being able to rebreathe expired air from the bag is critical to making sure that you actually have high enough CO2 values in your blood, because otherwise your body gets confused and you pass out a 7 in the lab that day. So apparently most of the R&D that went into this device was based around this magnetic valve.
Okay. And then the nose clip.
Oh, hell.
Okay. Okay. Up like this and down like that, okay? Breathe in. And down. Yeah, there you go. So as you can see, Laura's wearing a nose clip and breathing in and out through the mouthpiece to the tempo of the spirochecker. When she breathes in, or when she breathes out, the bag is first filled, and this contains, as Luke said, higher concentrations of carbon dioxide. And then the valve opens, allowing the rest of the air to be expired into the environment. Upon inspiration, the valve closes and the air from the bag is first breathed in, and then the valve opens, so the remaining air she breathes in is from the atmosphere. How do you find that? Right. So this method of breathing utilizes isocapnic hyperpnea. Utilizes isocapnic hyperpnea, ensuring hyperventilation and hypocarbia does not occur, which is what would normally happen if a participant was completing multiple stints of rapid deep breathing. By maintaining stable carbon dioxide levels, participants can safely perform RMT, improving the endurance and oxygen utilization of the respiratory muscles. And here you can see sort of what she's seeing on the display. I think it's posted. Yeah, that was it. Okay. Reflecting on this study, it's clear that sometimes the most well thought out plans don't go as planned. And it's taught me the importance of having to be flexible when conducting research. It also provided me with insight into with flexibility, it also provided insight into when challenges and insights do arise, taking those into account, as well as the importance of non-invasive and, in this case, portable equipment, allowing you to conduct the study outside of the lab if needed. Moving forward, I have 3 main recommendations for the Harris Lab. The first being the development of a maintenance plan for both the hardware and the software used for studies. As data is collected, I think the best option to avoid participants having the wrong bag size is for weekly updates on the volume that should be used for the sessions that are going to continue. This will also provide ongoing insight into the effectiveness of the RMT sessions. Finally, I think it would be interesting to look at how students who participate in other intramural sports might benefit differently from RMT. An interesting question to look at is, do students who play underwater hockey and intramural soccer benefit differently from students who play soccer and basketball? Lastly, I would like to thank the Harris Lab, Casey Long, Daniel Ioromi, and Julian Stokes. A special thank you to Casey for coming into the lab Sunday nights and Monday mornings. Tim Schwab, as my second reader, he provided me with invaluable feedback on how to further refine my study. And finally, to you, Luke, even though we had a few hiccups along the way, I have learned so much working with you. And when I look back at my time here at UNBC, I will always remember the support you. These are my references, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer. Not to increase the lung capacity, but the strength and endurance of the respiratory muscles. So when you're just breathing normally at rest, your diaphragm is the muscle that's doing the work. But as you intensify what you're doing, so say you're running or doing soccer, basketball, or underwater hockey, your accessory respiratory muscles are then being used. Yes. It's not so much the oxygen levels, but more so the carbon dioxide. So it's important to remain or to keep carbon dioxide levels at a particular level in your bloodstream, because otherwise you can go into hypocarbia, which is what probably happened to me when I fainted.
Were you talking about circulating oxygen? Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, so O2HB.
Oh, yes. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Mm-hmm. Yes. What I would be planning on extrapolating from the data would be over the course of the sessions, is the SEM muscle becoming stronger and is it using that oxygen more effectively? Yes. So yes. Obviously. How do you go about? At this moment in time, I don't know how we would go about integrating that information, but I do think it would be an important consideration to determine if the participant has a background in aerobic training or anaerobic training, and then what activities they currently do and at what levels. So I think there's a lot of different levels to the study that would have to be thought out. But I do think that you're right, that would be a very important consideration to take into account.
So can I add something as well? I don't think we should be too hard on the volunteer because Naomi's done a lot of this.
Yes.
And she's quite good at it. It's not an easy set of movements to coordinate, especially when you're trying to get visual feedback from the readout on the device. And to cold call someone to do this thing, it's really actually hard to do it. And I think Naomi, I think you intended that to ask the person to say what to do it. and maybe you just forgot for time reasons, but it might be worth asking, was it Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be worth asking Laura, what was it like? How did it feel?
Am I answering that?
Yeah.
I've done it. She's my roommate, so I've done it in the dorm once before, and it went a lot worse. Like I was September. It was hard. I don't think I had the nose piece though. That was a little weird. It feels awkward. I'm not gonna lie. It feels really awkward, and I can get better at it, but it was difficult.
I'm curious, we had to do these in my like undergrad, not this,
Yes.
but breathing in my undergrad physiology classes. And I think somebody did pass out and I don't know if they do that anymore. But it's, I'm a little bit curious about the NIRS technique a little bit. And I know you're measuring the muscle in the neck here, which is really kind of close to the surface. But I was just wondering if you can tell me a bit more about like other applications, like have people measured, like the oxygenation levels from other muscles or other areas of the body?
I know that in past studies, they didn't just put the NIRS devices on the SCM. They also provided, they put it on the bicep to provide like sort of a baseline, a muscle that is not a respiratory muscle, to see the differences as they're doing the same exercise. But you can also use the devices. I know Julian is using it for his master's, and he's putting it on their forehead. Yeah, on their forehead. Area. To look at the benefits of meditation. There's all kinds of ways that you can use NIRS. It doesn't just have to be for respiratory training.
So would you recommend this training? So let's say we do underwater hockey twice a week, and instead of doing a gym day the other day, would you recommend that we do this for training outside of underwater hockey practice?
I think if somebody was going to see real benefit from using the SpiroTiger, they would want to use it more than once a week, maybe 3 to 4 times a week for 20-minute stints, whether that be like over that 20 minutes, a minute using it, a minute break, and then they could build up appropriately to 90 seconds, a minute. There are some deep sea divers that do it for 20 minutes in one go, and they use, this is a 3-liter bag right here, and my lung volume is 2.19. Theirs is 12 liters. So they use a 12-liter bag. So it's depending on what you're doing and how much you're doing it, your bag size is going to increase. Lucas?
So this is going to depart, I think, from a little bit what you're going here, but talking about the NIRS device, is there ways to be able to put it on people while they're in the activity? Obviously, underwater hockey is underwater, so that's a whole different level. But like, soccer, whatever, to see how underwater hockey is interesting because it's diving.
Yeah.
To see whether live changes, not just like in a controlled environment.
I'm not sure that we could use the NIRS device while it's underwater because it's just electronics. It's not really waterproof, but that's definitely something, having a person wear it while they're completing an on-land sport is definitely something that you could do.
I mean, this was one of the goals of setting the lab up in the first place was to take NIRS into the field. And we haven't done it as much as I hoped, but we took it out. One of my grad students took it out the field with wildfire fighters, and they actually had it on people while they were doing their active wildfire fighting, and the data were bonkers. It's really it was a monumental challenge to even start to analyze it, and I mean, one of the things that Naomi's experienced is that dealing with movement artifact, and again, like light leakage when the thing starts to lift from the skin a little bit, these are challenges that we in our lab didn't originally anticipate having to face because nobody had really done field testing of NIRS at that level. So yeah.
The portability of the device is really cool. It's something I really think is interesting. This is just a power bank. So really you can just strap it onto someone like this because it connects to the laptop via Bluetooth. You just need tape or something to hold it in place.
The other thing Naomi didn't mention, like she did a bunch of hardware repair basically, and these things cost $15,000 a piece. So I would be very hesitant to strap it onto a soccer player and say, hey, go for it.
One question. Yeah. I don't know if you mentioned, but have you analyze like a sports person before and after using?
Before, we always do a 5-minute baseline, and then after we do the same.
Oh,
Yes, yeah.
Hold my hands. You have time? Yeah, okay.
It was mentioned that you're a swimmer.
Yes.
What is the significance of the underwater hockey specific? Testing other underwater hockey players or just yourself?
Originally, that was going to be the plan, but due to the circumstances, we didn't have time to test it with other underwater hockey players. But the hope is to bring the study forward into underwater hockey, would hopefully be the plan as this for the idea for the study. Laura?
How do you figure out somebody's initial bag size?
Oh, that's a good question. So you take we have a spirometer, and they take a deep breath in and then they blow out into it. And that measures their forced expiratory volume for 1 second and 6 seconds. And then I take 6 seconds and I times it by 0.55, so 55% of their lung capacity. And then, so in my case, I got 2.19. And so what we did is we weighed out 2.19 pounds, kilograms, thank you, of water. And then I poured it into the bag and marked it where the water line was, and then dumped it out and let it dry. And then that's how we knew what the bag size was. That was a trick question Luke gave me a couple weeks ago. How do we measure the bag size to the appropriate amount?
We have questions.
Okay. Pardon? I did not find any studies that did a long-term analysis, but there are multiple studies, as I said, that examine RMT with other athletics, and then also with particularly with patients with COPD and how it can benefit those with COPD. Pardon? Over age, I think if a person is to continuously use this on a week-to-week basis, they would definitely see the long-term benefits from the device. However, I think if you do it for a year, say 3 times a week for 1 year, in 10 years, you're not going to have the same benefits as you would if you continued it for that 10 years. Pardon? I'm actually not sure what sport could replace it, but I can look into that for you and get back to you. Thank you so much.
That was the end of our all presentations, and thank you to all our honors students. You all did incredibly well, and we are so proud of you guys. So once again, I just want to remind you all, we do have the membership portal for the HRI Connect. So a good way to get connected with HRI and know all about it. So it'd be great if you guys can just go in. And one more thing, once again, I'm the project coordinator. So just advertising again, we have the research commons, which would be so beneficial as undergraduate and graduate students to just get your research going. And we want to be there for your entire research cycle and be there and support you guys. So this is a great way to get there and your voices be heard. So it's on the April 7th, and we are having a webinar. It's on Zoom. It wouldn't take much of your time. So it would be great if you guys can join and just throw in all your recommendations. So once again, thank you guys.